as most of you know, we said goodbye to a very special friend, Ralph Hauenstein. Almost 104 years old, an amazing human being. And I wanted just to remind you why Ralph was so amazing and why so many people came to his funeral mass, to his visitation, to say goodbye to him. He was really 103 years young. He led in every endeavor that he undertook. And not by being one of these dominant alpha males that had to go strutting into a room, but in a very different and gentle and wonderful way. How was it that Ralph was able to lead African American Civilian Conservation Corps camps back in the 1930s and fight for their civil rights? How was it that he was able to be a leading journalist in this town for the old Grand Rapids Herald, and at a very young age become city editor of that newspaper? How was it that he was able to rise to the rank of colonel under General Eisenhower and help with the planning of D-Day, and to go into continental Europe as they were peeling back the German army and to liberate Dachau and see some of the horrible things that he saw and come out intact? How was it that he was able to turn his military career into a great international entrepreneurial career where he was feeding literally hundreds of thousands of people around the world, especially in the developing world, where he knew there was a special obligation for the first world to help people in need? How was it that he could come back to West Michigan and have such an outstanding career as a philanthropist and give back because life had been so good, the community had been so good to him, and he felt that keen obligation to give back? In all these ways, Ralph was very special. He founded the Hauenstein Center. We're fortunate enough to be here back in 2001. And he didn't just write a check and go off to Florida and enjoy his retirement, as anybody certainly wouldn't have blamed him had he done. He stayed involved. As you know, you've heard the stories. Ralph came back to our programs again and again and again. He would sit right there in that chair. Most recently, just a few months ago, he came to our last program, and the students loved him. He was a rock star. When Bono came to town and heard all the great things that Ralph had done for his community, for communities in Latin America, for communities in Africa, Bono said, "I know I'm getting an award tonight here in Grand Rapids, but the real cool cat in our midst is Ralph Hauenstein." It's true, the cool cat. I mean, Ralph could be called a doctor, he could be called a knight, he could be called a colonel. He had so many titles, but he loved the title that Bono gave him, cool cat. Just very briefly, all this last week in the media appearances, I'm asked again and again, what were the traits that Ralph Hauenstein possessed that made him an effective leader, whether dealing with Republicans, Democrats, liberals, progressives, conservatives, being able to cross the aisle in his own conversations, in all three sectors, public sector, nonprofit, and for-profit sector. How was he able to cross all those sectors and be such an effective leader? And just very briefly, just a few of the traits. He had integrity. He was always asking himself, what's the next right thing to do in this situation? People mess up. People mess up all the time. And he'd look at a situation and say, okay, we're going to get beyond this. We're going to grow through this. We're going to do the next right thing. And he had that force of personality, not by beating his chest and being the alpha male in the room, but in a very gentle, persuasive way. Ralph also had keen emotional intelligence, a second trait that I would point out to you. Ralph could walk into a room and he could understand where people were coming from, and he could reach them where they were. He was not a judgmental man. If you spent time around Ralph, it's not too much to say you felt his love and his acceptance and his desire to do whatever he could to improve your community. He also had a third trait, I would say, is adaptive intelligence. A lot of people are book smart. A lot of people do great on the tests, the standardized tests. Ralph certainly had that ability, even though he never went to college. But Ralph also had the ability to look at a situation. So, for example, at the end of World War II, and to see the starvation, the food needs, and to parlay that into a career in international trade and food. This is why we have goldfish crackers, Andes mints, all kinds of breads. He brought the pasta industry, really raised the pasta industry in this country, working very closely with the Italians. So he had that adaptive intelligence to see what people needed. He had resilience. I alluded a minute ago to the horrible things that Ralph had seen in the war. Unspeakable things. There were things at certain points when he would tell a story, there was a point where he had to stop. He could not speak the evil that he had seen, especially in Dachau. And the commandant of that concentration camp, who sneered with pride at the lamp made from Jewish skin. And Ralph hustled him out of there. He couldn't wait to get this guy into the Nuremberg trials, and he was later hanged. He got his justice. Ralph was a passionate man about those things. He saw things that no human being should have to see. But he also had resilience, emotional resilience for having worked through all the evil that he was exposed to, and he kept a sense of humor. He was one of the funniest men you would have ever encountered in any room because he knew the alternative. He said, I've seen with my own eyes the worst that human beings are capable of in the 20th century, and I want to do everything I can in the 21st century to make sure that we cultivate the best leaders possible, and that means you, the leadership fellows in this room. He planted acorns, knowing that he would never see them grow to the mighty oaks that you will be in your communities. But he planted those acorns with faith in you. It was about you. And that was the most beautiful thing about him. I just want to leave you with a sense of his sense of humor. The last thing I'll say before I bring Scott up. But, Ralph was a very adaptable guy, and he's always curious and interested in new things. And one of his granddaughters said, they call him Papa, they said, Papa, you got to learn this social media stuff. It'll help you stay in touch with all of your friends. He said, honey, at my age, when I want to be in touch with my friends, I bring out the Ouija board. That was Ralph Hauenstein. Always had a quip, was always very funny, right up to the end.